I'm hitting the button. And we are live. So everyone that is already watching, thank you so much. We are going to just wait a couple more minutes to make sure everyone that wants to participate can join, because we're starting at 3 o'clock Mountain Daylight Savings Time here in Calgary, Alberta. While we're waiting to start, those who are watching already, please say hi into the chat so we know you're watching. As well, why don't you say where you are from? So go ahead and put it into the chat, and love to see who's all tuning in, where you are tuning in from, perhaps what company you work for, things like that. I know Matt's mom is watching. Matt's mom, say hi.
Hi, Mom.
Okay. And we'll wait just another minute before we get started here. Okay. Looks like we have some people watching now, so we can probably go ahead and get started. And if anyone is late, that's okay. They can always rewatch the stream here, as well as can pop in throughout the time. We're going to be here for about an hour and a half, or as long as all of you have questions. So we're going to kick it off. I'll share my LinkedIn profile with you all. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Fun fact, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, my little cover photo that you see on the background of my profile is actually the orchard I grew up on. And so my window actually was the view that you see in that photo there. I overlooked it. So was really lucky. So we're going to now introduce our panel of experts here at 3DP. Just as a reminder, throughout this event, please feel free to continuously leave comments, ask questions. We love as many questions as possible, so go and pop them into the chat, and we'll answer them as we progress through the event here. So for those of you who are joining now, we had quite a few people just join. I love to hear where all of you are from, where you're tuning into, what company you work for. We have people, it looks like, from all over North America and the world attending, so that's awesome. So I'll introduce myself. I am Nicole Miller. I will be moderating this event. I'm a marketing specialist here at 3DP, and I've been with them for just about 4 months, so pretty brand spanking new. Jeremy, why don't you kick it off and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. My name is Jeremy Bernstein. I've been with 3DP for about 8 years now through a variety of roles. I started out in technical support, both on the IT side and our customer support side. Later moved into a management role of the support department, and now I am a solutions architect, so helping customers come up with solutions to fit their needs. So happy to be here.
Okay, great. Matt?
Hey, I'm Matt Rankin. I've worked at 3DP for about 8 years. Like Jer, I came from the support department. I'm currently solutions architect, which really, same as Jer, we work with customers to assess their needs and find a network that fits for them.
Awesome. Nigel?
G'day, I'm Nigel Slater. I've been with 3DP for about 8 years as well. Started in the services and field group and have had various roles. And today I look after business development for the rest of the world outside of North and South America, and I'm based in Australia.
Awesome. Wow, so we have quite a few people who are tuning in now and have populated the chat with where they're all from. We have Richard Doyle. Hey there, Richard, from Madison Tech in Australia. People from Nova Scotia, Palm Beach, Florida, Calgary, Colorado, Turkey, Istanbul. That's awesome. Welcome. Toronto, again, Arizona, some more people from Australia. So great to have all of you here.
Nicole, as you read that list out, I noticed that Matt started to look more and more worried because it's become more and more real.
Yeah. I thought we were only talking to my mom, so.
Your mom still hasn't said hi in the chat. I don't even know if she's tuning in for you.
That might be a little advanced.
Oh, we have Chad. Chad used to work for 3DP and now he's with Nokia. Welcome, Chad. So glad you're able to tune in. I'm sure a lot of people who are tuning in right now have spoken to Chad as well. Ron White, it looks like you got that backdrop in your living room, the 3DP logo. Chad says he misses you guys. We miss you too, Chad. That's awesome. Oh, we also have Daryl from Ragent. Welcome. Glad to see you on the phone here, or into the chat, I should say. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with some of the topics that we had prepared for you all today. And again, for those of you that are just joining us, please feel free to speak into the chat here and put forth any questions that you have for our panel of experts. Now is your time to ask any questions and they're free to respond to them. They'd love to have questions from you guys. They'd much prefer questions from you than from me, that's for sure. So go ahead and put it in the chat. Feel free, don't be shy. So we will kick it off with our first topic. And we would like to first start with a little bit of an icebreaker. So what is one misconception of wireless connectivity? Matt, what's one misconception you've come across?
The first one that comes to mind is how disastrous having rogue access points are out on your network. You know, people turning on hotspots on their phone and the phone can be on the wrong channel and it can really be obliterating a lot of communications that you're having going on. Something that we've seen for sure before, definitely something that we can help with. So that's the first one I think of. Yeah,
what about you, Jeremy?
I think being mindful of what traffic you're putting out on your network is really important. Making sure you're tuning your coverage zones optimally for your needs. Those are really big ones that we're constantly either helping customers with or helping troubleshoot. But those come to mind as being really, really big ones for sure.
100%. Nigel?
Yeah, I think we've seen people do this before, that, you know, the higher up you put access points, the better and cheaper and easier it will be, because you'll get better coverage, and probably comes from you know, two-way voice radio, where usually, you know, the concept is put your antennas up on a tower, get as much coverage over the area that you can possibly get, and higher and more power is better. And that's completely the opposite of what you know, you really need to do, particularly in Wi-Fi 8 or 2.11 standards based sort of things, because they don't work like that. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about that as the session goes on. But yeah, we've seen people try that. Doesn't work very well.
Giant antennas, bigger is better, not always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bigger is not always better, guys. That is for sure. So, Nigel, can you answer for me then? One of the first topics that we want to talk about today is, what are some of the considerations a client should have for choosing wireless technology for their site?
Yeah, I'll start with a pretty kind of oblique one, actually, because to me, this one, if you get it right, really determines how effective your not only, an implementation project is for rolling out a new wireless network, but how effective it'll be ongoing in your care and feeding. And I think it's really, the consideration is, what are your capabilities? What's your capacity, and what's your want? So what that means is, your capability is really about the right people with the right expertise and background. And because we work with companies all over the world, we have some very expert people as customers. They're very adept at, particularly wireless technology and that sort of thing. So their capability is really high. We also have customers which, consider themselves, just operators. They just run a mine, or they just run a port, and they don't want to have anything to do with the technology. Like they realize that's not their speciality. So their capability by nature is, pretty low. Their capacity is really about, how strung out they are, I suppose. You can easily have a company that's pretty adept. They've got expertise in-house, but they're looking after so many elements of technology and mining that they just might not have the time to look after a brand spanking new wireless network. So their capacity could be very low, even though their capability could be pretty strong. And the third one is want. What we hear, maybe 50% of the time is, we don't want to be experts. We will do the bare minimum to support the network, and 3DP's job is to help and train people to, to develop the minimum expertise required to look after the network, but they don't want to take it beyond that. So those considerations, if we can help, if we can engage with customers in the right way, we can really uncover that story and deliver a project that is fit for purpose for a particular customer and how they're built and what they want. But we can also help them in the longer term as well, if, particularly if they're lacking in capability or capacity, or simply don't want to do too much themselves. So that's a bit of a soft consideration, not really a technical one, but really important. If we can get that bit right, and if we can develop a good kind of honest conversation around that, we'll get the engagement right, because we'll meet our customer with the right people and the right approach to success.
That's awesome. I just wanted to add, Joshua put in, when we were talking about antennas, he's like, higher equals better lightning rod.
That is very true.
So
Nice
true.
work.
Have you guys ever heard of any antennas being struck by lightning? Or if anyone who's listening right now, can you put it into the chat if you've heard of that happening?
I was actually at a site. I was at a site, and we were doing a final install here in Australia, and a lightning storm came through, and lightning hit on really, really close. Didn't actually hit the tower we were in, but it hit a nearby hill. And it took out, it must have caused a bit of bump in power, and a few circuit breakers broke. But what was really funny was, we have these mini tornadoes in Australia called willy willies, and they're basically a spinning thing of air. And we had all these documents sitting out, like we were doing a commissioning on the site, and we had all these documents sitting out on the plinth of one of the legs of the tower. And this willy willy came up and ran straight through us, and all of the paper went up in the air and disappeared over the edge of the hill. So yeah, it's a bit of excitement. But yeah, lightning rods, great.
Matt, what are you gonna say?
I was just going to say, it's not uncommon. We get calls quite a bit, not quite a bit, but a couple times a year probably, where customers telling us, we've lost an access point. What can we do can you guys help us out with coverage in that area? Just due to lightning strikes on all kinds of different equipment, towers and trailers. So yeah, not uncommon.
Yeah. We had one of our major customers last year. I won't get into names, obviously, but they lost, I think it was 5 or 6 towers, and a significant portion of their network due to a severe lightning storm that went through. And it was a pretty interesting one. But the fleet was able to keep working because of the technology we put in place and everything. So it's kind of a bit of a win despite the chaos it caused.
That's an amazing case story. I didn't know that. That would be pretty neat to see. Jeff Heath was just saying he actually saw it happen. Jeff, if you're listening, please give us more details in the chat. I want to hear about this. Actually watching a lightning strike hit an antenna, that would be really funny. Shane says,
it's not funny for the owner though.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
They got a bit upset.
100%.
It was a bit stressful.
So Shane says, lightning has taken out one of our site links currently. Oh man, I'm sorry. As a surveyor, I was more concerned about cows eating cables, repeater cables. Yeah. Brent's asking, is there any way to protect the radios? Brent, I assume you mean from storms. Is that correct? So we'll go ahead and
we do, for our tower installations, and solar trailer installations, we do deploy lightning protection units. On a taller tower, we typically have one up near the radio or the antenna itself, and then another one further down. So there is some double protection there. Unfortunately, they're not foolproof. They can still allow some through in a catastrophic event, but it does help and can certainly save some of your gear, or certainly save upstream of the gear.
And we usually rely on the OEMs, the people that make the radios and the gear. They usually have a set of best practices and possibly even their own lightning protection units and grounding kits, and they'll give us. They give direction in terms of how to install it and make sure that you put the right number of grounding kits in and lightning protection units and where they go. So we follow what they tell us because they know their product pretty well. Yeah.
Jeff is saying not funny when you're 50 feet away, that's for sure. So Chad was asking, so how do you design a network to avoid outages in the event of a lightning strike, aside from just lightning protection?
Great question, Chadley.
There's a lot of things that should be considered, and a lot of it comes down to the customer's want and desire to have redundancy built into their network. Certain technologies, such as Regent, for example, they've got an incredible client meshing protocol, so that their technology can actually bounce through each client to get back to an infrastructure node. So if a critical infrastructure node was to go down, it doesn't mean that you're dead in the water. So maybe things slow down, but ultimately traffic will continue to operate and will make its way back home, which is why they call them breadcrumbs, hence the Hansel and Gretel reference. So that's one thing to consider. And then there's just additional redundancy that you can engineer and design into your systems. That it's all part of our process. We need to have those discussions and again think about the need of the customer and ultimately where they want to go and what their tolerance is for downtime, because as we all know, downtime at a mine is where the true cost of any solution comes in. So
yeah, really good question. Do either Matt or Nigel have anything to add to that?
Pretty much said it. Really just, it's how you design a network and understand that if you lose any single point on it, are you going to be able to recover, or are things going to still work for you? So it all goes into the design phase.
Yeah. So really specifically, we have a piece called the discovery phase right at the beginning. And what we're endeavoring to do is find out when we're at the network, when we're looking at the mine site, how many potential points of ingress have we got into their wide network. And that builds in a level of redundancy. As Jer said, the Regent technology provides this fantastic self-healing and resiliency kind of part as well. But it's also things like designing for overlap of your distribution network, so that if you've got a solar trailer out there and it needs to point to Tower A, and Tower A gets blown up by a lightning strike because Jeff's nearby, it gives you the ability to turn that solar trailer around and point it to Tower B, and that all makes obviously our customers' lives easy. So those considerations are absolutely important, fundamental to getting it right.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. We also had a comment about deploying thunder arresters at the top of the towers, things like that. So that ties into our next topic. We started speaking about it, but a little bit more to add to that is, what are some of the best practice considerations when designing a wireless network for a site? Jeremy?
Kind of touches on Nigel's comment. You need to conduct a needs analysis. You really need to understand everything that's intended to go on that network. You need to work closely with your customer to make sure that they're aware of what applications are going to be used, whether current or future. It needs to be considered. In an ideal situation, we're able to look at a mine plan, for example, and look out as far as possible. We can engineer to that if need be. At a minimum, be prepared to have a solution that's scalable. As the mine grows, you're going to want to be able to add on to this network, and you don't want it you don't want to outgrow it at the end of the day. So the needs analysis ultimately will be what allows us to engineer and choose the right technology as well as the right solution. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then I would also say it's really important to understand their coverage requirements. So certain applications need different levels of coverage. Perhaps on a haul road where you've got a couple mile long haul, you don't need full coverage for those haul trucks. But at the working face at your shovel, anything down and around that area needs to have full coverage and full capacity to be able to get that data back onto the wire as quickly as possible. So those are two of the biggest ones I'll touch on.
Great. Nigel or Matt, do you have anything else to add with that?
No, I don't. That's a pretty good answer.
I think at the basis of it, the best practice is to learn to listen. As Jeremy said, our engagement is all about understanding the needs. We have an internal process which is really important to us called the 3 pillars of successful design of a network. And the first one is really the most important. The others kind of follow in form. The first one's, we call it the domain, but the domain is everything about it's the customer themselves. They're, what they want, what they need, how they operate. It's the environment, it's the physical environment, the topography of the mine, like Jess said, how it's going to progress over the next 3 to 5 years. It's the weather, understanding what the weather's like where you are will actually change the way we design our solar antennas and our solar trailers and giving you the right amount of autonomy for when you've got low daylight hours, or even the technology used in the solar trailers. And listening and making sure that that we really fully understand what the needs are and what the domain is the ultimate best practice. If we don't listen and we don't capture that data, we get the needs wrong. That will impact the design and the operation of the network for the life of the network. And the second bit is really the application. So the second of the 3 pillars is the application or applications. Not just about the application that you're using now, obviously that's really important, but the application you intend to use in 2 years' time is so important because it allows us to design a network that's actually ready. We need to know if you're going to do something with remote control or autonomy or something in 2 years' time, and that'll also drive technology choices as well. So listening, talking, being educated and educating are really important best practices to get this whole thing right. Our job isn't a transactional one where we give you a bit of paper and say, just fill in the blanks. It is really about talking and listening and understanding.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we have a couple questions coming into the chat here. What do you see as the future of connectivity in mining, wireless mining? How do you see, or how do you bridge the current to the future systems? That's a great question. So Chad, I think, is basically asking, how do we bridge new and greatest technology coming into wireless networks in mining, and how do we connect it from current to future needs?
I'll start off if you like. Well, one of the things we've been really successful at, and our customers have really been equally successful, is really around our product. We've been in the habit of making hybrid or dual radio technology endpoints probably for 10 or 12 years now, and how that starts is really around our focus on what technology is available out there, right? So as technologies, new technologies come to bear and they start to be discussed, and things like LTE or 802.11ac, 802.11ax, going back when 802.11n was a thing, and Ragent, all of those technologies potentially offer something. And our job is to look at the potential offer in terms of mining, or port, or agriculture, the verticals that we've already operated in, and deciding whether the technology adds value in that context. Now, we know that something like 802.11ax or 5G LTE are going to be rip-roaring wireless technologies. But the question is, will a D8 dozer support 8 or 10 antennas on it to get the full capability of the technology? So those sort of questions we've got to ask, we've got to answer, we've got to test. We bring in the technologies, we set them up, we test them, and we ask some really fundamental questions. Does the technology provide, in those scenarios and of those industrial environments, do they provide any additional benefit to the customer above what's available now? And if we answer no, we probably don't look at it until it's changed over time. If we answer yes, then we look at a lot more about the ecosystem of the technology. What that results in, and what it has for us in the past, if you look at the development of our product, we back probably 10 years ago, we sold a bunch of radios that were based on the technology at the time for us, which was Moto Mesh Solo, which was fantastic in mining during the 2000s, right? That's one of the things that we kind of grew on. We knew 802.11n was coming to the fore, and so we started integrating that technology into our Moto Mesh radios. So as a result, when customers wanted to migrate from Moto Mesh to 802.11n, they could continue using the same endpoints. They had a really easy transition, and it was fantastic for those customers. Similarly, today, we have done the same with our Ospreys. We have, everyone I'd say on this call, or most people, know that LTE is becoming quite predominant, certainly is in Australia. And we've used that concept to provide migration strategies from customers that have 802.11n, some performance enhancement by combining it with Ragent technology. So for us, it's not even just about the technology or the new technology itself. It's about whether it's right, whether it provides value, and how we best use it with our products. So, Matt, Jer?
That was a great answer.
That's great. We had a comment on the chat. Josh was saying it's hard keeping 4 antennas on a D11. Imagine 6 or more.
Exactly.
Yeah, Matt?
It's a great comment.
I can't expand on Nigel's answer. That's a great answer.
But part of what Nigel touched on, it is important to take those considerations. Like, having 8, 10 antennas on a piece of equipment, one, there's not enough room to get the spatial diversity to actually get the performance out of them that you need to take advantage of these technologies. And 2, the maintenance headache and installation headache that it would create is is it worth it, right? So
Yeah.
those all need to be factored in. So, and then you also need to do a lot of homework on the types of antennas that are going to be able to take advantage of these as well. Like there's a lot of thought that has to go into these solutions and the
And
engineering.
a really good example, a recent one, Jer, is because we're working in LTE with a number of customers at the moment. The bands that are used in LTE, obviously, they entail different frequencies of operation. And one thing that RF engineers deal with all the time is the concept of harmonics. So when you transmit on a particular channel, you can create a number of harmonics that operate outside of that channel. And what we've learned recently doing some of these studies about what's best and what's better and what's fantastic is that certain bands in LTE land have harmonics, and quite strong harmonics, that have the potential to land on other technologies that are used on mining vehicles. And knowing that is it's part of the work we do. We don't want to find those things out when we deploy in the field. We want to know beforehand so that we can make the right technology choices before we deploy. So that's that detail is also incredibly important. It gets right down to where the antenna is placed so that they don't interfere with each other in particular bands with particular harmonics.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would love to hear in the chat for anyone that's watching if they have any stories about overuse of antennas or any stories about sort of anything that we just talked about. Please put it in the chat and tell us about some of the experiences that you faced, and maybe other people that are watching can learn from some of these experiences as well. So pop it in. We would love to hear sort of any anecdotes or stories that any of you that are watching might have. So we are getting quite a few questions, panel, about LTE. So we know that that's one of the topics that are really popular right now in mining. So I think I'll kick it off with a couple of the questions that we have in the chat here. So we have Muhammad. Hello, I joined late. No worries. You're always welcome to join. You can watch it after as well for the beginning part that you missed. What is panel's thought? You guys are the panel. What's panel's thought on private LTE and 5G?
I can start off on the private. The private LTE stuff is exciting. It's interesting. I think if you've got a mine site, if it's something that you're able to do, that's probably a pretty good path to go down. With public LTE, there's going to be a couple of hurdles that you might have to overcome. You're going to be possibly sharing spectrum with the general public. There's a bit of a switching or routing hurdle in there. Just those are two of the things that come to the top of my mind that you do have to consider for sure if you're going public. Whereas private, it's all your own spectrum. You can control what's going on there. Make your life a little bit easier, I think.
I think the other one comes to mind is also just simple things like the availability of spectrum and what spectrum it is. We know that we've typically got availability between 700 megs up to 3.5, 3.6, possibly above, and that affects the design with private LTE. So that's an important factor. Jer, you got any comments?
All good comments, but part of it is obviously availability. Keeping that traffic private is very important to a lot of mines. So having a partner, like we are partnered with Nokia for LTE, that's one thing. It's also important to consider, like, LTE can't solve everything either. There are challenges with LTE from it's a layer 3 technology if you want to get deep into the networking stack, whereas most mining applications are still layer 2. So there does need to be considerations made when you start playing in the LTE space of what type of tunneling technology you're going to be employing to solve those challenges. Not insurmountable by any means, but it's something to consider. But at the same point, LTE has an unbelievable ability to stretch long distances, and receive sensitivities are incredibly high. So you can maintain a connection to neg 115, sometimes even worse. Whereas a 802.11 solution, about neg 80, you're starting to lose that connection. So again, all things to consider. And I guess to touch on the 5G, it depends. There's so many factors to consider. Again, it's going to come down to your antenna selection, the spectrum in use. So there's a lot of factors that need to be considered before you can just rubber stamp a yay or nay. So
the other thing I think that's really important about, first of all, private spectrum is that when a miner decides to purchase private spectrum, the difficulty is you're dealing with a really complex technology. It's not like maintaining a Wi-Fi network or a Radiant network, which is especially in terms of Radiant, really easy to maintain. You don't need a lot of certifications in things. It's a great manageable technology. And what we've seen in parts of the world is LTE private networks being delivered, and then the miner really not having an outcome. If you look at the outcome that the miner wants, it is just stability for the applications they're using. That's it. The technology should be a black box that delivers on an outcome that you've ultimately paid for. And when that doesn't work, and when the application shows signs of instability, the question is why. I've got LTE, I've got my towers, and it's not working. And then you enter into this realm of, well, how do I know what's going on? Like, what are my problems? And as I said, LTE is a complex technology. So we've seen and are seeing mines that are having issues with their LTE, and they're completely unknown. They really don't know. They're getting E-node Bs drop out from the cores for some reason. It might be to do with backhaul design. They are seeing no coverage or changing coverage where they're expecting to get it. So that creates this whole new requirement for the miner. Do I skill up with a bunch of LTE engineers and people that know, that can actually manage and maintain the network? Am I getting the support from my vendor? Are they actually helping me uncover why these things aren't working? And our view of it is, our approach to it is, we've developed a bunch of tools that the miners can use that go on our endpoints, so that you can actually see how the LTE network's performing from the client side. So back to that capability and capacity and want piece, LTE is great. We know that it's not the panacea for all. It operates to the laws of physics, and it'll improve with 5G. But are you ready to be able to manage it and understand it, and make sure that you don't find yourself in a situation where it's not working properly and I don't know why? And we're certainly endeavouring to solve that with some customers that have got issues from previous installs. On the 5G thing, for us, it comes back to a bunch of knowns, I suppose. 5G is early on, and remembering that 5G is a standard that technologies can evolve to, and it doesn't have to be a single technology. We're talking about LTE and 5G. It's quite new. There's a few things around that I mentioned before to get the maximum capability out of something that can possibly have throughput of, a gigabit. You need lots of antennas to achieve that. First of all, we already mentioned that. And the second question is, does a single mining vehicle out there in the pit need 800 megabits of throughput? What for? What advantage are you going to get out of it? So they're important questions technically.
And when that 800 megabits hits your wired network, what are you going to do with it?
What are you going to do with it? Yeah.
That makes me nervous.
Third is also availability of the technology in terms of what we need, and that is the right form factor. Someone's actually manufacturing a chipset that will provide that, and it's going to end up in some sort of LTE modem or something that we can use. So that's still slow, like is ruggedized form factors and those sorts of things available. Probably the biggest one that I've heard is that the infrastructure cost, obviously because it's new and it is higher tech and ultimately more complex than 4G, is a magnitude more expensive. So what we're doing working with our customers at the moment is working through those questions. Is it worth paying 10 times what it now currently costs for LTE to give something that will give you 10 times the performance? And how will you see the benefit from it? And if you can't see the benefit and you can't really overcome the deployment issues, is it the right thing? And that might be a purely valid right at this point in time. In 4 years' time, we've learned a lot, our customers have learned a lot, and there's somewhere in the middle, and the price will come down. So it's early days. We're certainly watching it. We're getting equipment in to play with it and understand it better. And it's exciting times to be in communications in general, I reckon.
Yeah, so Mohammed wanted to add to that. So he said CBRS is now getting available. We keep hearing that 5G will improve latency and security. So that's interesting there. Maybe you guys can comment on that, as well as we have a question here. What brand of vendor equipment do you use for drive testing on LTE coverage? How do you check it?
Right there, right behind
it's
you.
the little red box.
There it is, right there.
Yeah, Nigel said a black box, but the reality is it's a red box.
Red box, there you go, sorry, yes.
That's our in-house technology. That's our Osprey. So that's our 5th generation endpoint that we've been developing. We've been building endpoints since 2004, I want to say. And we've released over 13,000 of them worldwide over the years. So, and some of those original ones are still in place. So it's a proven platform. You know, of course, it's iterated with the technologies over time, but that thing is built for mining. So it solves a lot of the challenges and a lot of the environmental issues that come about as a result of being in mining, whether it's vibration or shock or temperatures or any of the other things. And again, going to Nigel's point where, you know, embedding multiple radios, that one behind Matt, I believe, is a hybrid one, which it's got a Ragent radio inside it, as well as an LTE modem inside of it, a 4G LTE modem. So, I mean, there's...
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, you go.
I was just going to say, like, there's a lot to talk about there for drive testing, whether LTE network, Wi-Fi network, Ragent network. I was just going to say, if they want more information, they should reach out, because I mean, we can have a long discussion about that for sure.
I think we've got a pretty good video that Ron, our president, did recently, and I think a really good example of the solution, and a bit of a shout out to David Loddick, our man of many means in Australia, recently helped a customer that was having those LTE issues. They had some excavators using a particular application. They had some LTE modems on there, just, you know, common off the shelf stuff, and they just constantly got intermittent dropouts, couldn't get the application to work. So David took one of our Ospreys up there and did a drive test to understand not only the coverage, the throughput, the latency, collecting some of the LTE data like RSRP to understand what the actual capacity of the LTE system was in the area, and presented the output of that, which is a nice color-coded heat map showing where decent, stable connectivity was available in that pit. And that took all of probably 2 hours of driving around and 30 minutes of running it through our visualizer and popping it out the other end. So simple technology to use, outcome really, really important.
Yeah, it's important that you're collecting that data right at the edge, so you're seeing what your trucks are seeing as they're roaming around, not what the core switch or, you know, the Enode B might be seeing. So,
Yeah, if you're doing that test from your network, from the middle of your network, all you know is the device went offline. You've got no context for what's at sea out there. So that is key. It's very important.
Yeah, good point. We have a question here from Brent. He's asking, do you need to purchase a bandwidth to incorporate an LTE frequency in the United States specifically?
I think he's probably speaking about bands themselves. There are public or private LTE options, so it really depends on your environment. Some mines are right in the midst of an urban area, and private spectrum may not be a possibility because it may be consumed by other people who have already purchased it or leased it. So you may be left with only a public option. So there's many technologies out there, but it kind of depends. So and then selecting your LTE modem, ultimately you need to make sure that it supports the bands that are available to you, whether again they're private or public. So that's an important consideration.
And specifically for North America, CBRS is the main like the network that we've put together is a CBRS based network. So it's private spectrum. We own it, so that's certainly available.
Okay, great. So Shane is asking here, do you have a clear boundary of where LTE is preferable to the Radiant style breadcrumb solution? Where is a hybrid approach best?
I can try and handle that first. Honestly, from my perspective anyway, and I think we're all pretty excited about it, I believe it's the best of both worlds. So I don't think there is a boundary. It blurs that boundary. Radiant's InstaMesh technology is incredibly adept at handling the challenges of mining. The InstaMesh protocol already handles the layer 2 tunneling natively. There's just not a lot of extra that has to be added to that to allow it to use LTE on top of InstaMesh. So like I said, it takes the best of both worlds and really combines them together. LTE, because it can reach so far, it's not particularly great at bending around obstacles or possibly reaching it to furthest reaches of your pit at the working face where you probably need your maximum coverage. So the InstaMesh can pick up the slack at that point and ultimately, end up bouncing through another vehicle to get back to a node that has LTE coverage, or maybe a Radiant infrastructure coverage, whichever. And the nice thing is with the hybrid, there's no handoff. Like, I mean, the connection management is really important, and that's something that shouldn't be. It was a big design consideration is being able to handle those connections, and it's quite incredible how well it works. So
yeah, awesome.
So if you look at the scenarios, I suppose that kind of currently driving what we're doing with customers, customers that have existing LTE networks that aren't performing and aren't delivering what was promised. They've reached out to us and our partners to say, look, I think we need something to enhance the performance of the LTE network. And at that point, the decision is pretty simple in terms of we can and have started putting mesh and LTE hybrid Ospreys onto mine vehicles, and we can test their performance. We can see if you consider this approach to be really pretty incremental, and that is because we've got all of the tools on board of the endpoints themselves, we can tell whether that purely vehicle-to-vehicle meshing will supplement any LTE coverage or performance issues by itself. And we can tell that pretty quickly because that's what the Osprey does. It gives us that really fantastic tactile feedback from the endpoint. Alternatively, if it's not, then introducing some Radiant infrastructure, as Jer said, deep pits, deep working faces down at the bottom, LTE might not be getting down there, and your applications are in an incredible amount of use around your diggers and your dozers and the like. So that's where you need your performance. That might require, depending on that domain, understanding of the customer's domain. How many vehicles have you got? What applications you're running? What's the density in a particular area? That this then falls back on us from our experience, knowing you really need to put in this much extra infrastructure to support what's not working. The other side of it is more from a greenfields approach, where we've got customers that want new networks and they've asked for hybrid. They simply want to go down a best of, as Jer said, best of both worlds approach. And again, using something, if it's a public, one of the really important drivers of the hybrid Osprey was the possibility that some of our customers only had public spectrum available. It wasn't designed to cover a mine site everywhere, and this was a great opportunity to provide that infill. So, any and all approaches are valid. It really depends on where the customer's starting from, and that will determine, I think, what the question was, what the split should actually be. And we've got the tools to figure that out.
Yeah, that's great. So, Matt, this question is specifically for you, Matt. You can blame Anyeka Zach for that one. Matt, when you explained LTE can radiate much greater distance, can you point out exactly what cell radius kilometer coverage can be configured in an E node B?
No. You can't, because it really does depend on what band you're going to be operating in. And even beyond then, I could tell you CBRS goes X amount of kilometers or meters. But once you get to, what are your needs? If you get out to the edge of that coverage, it might not be good enough for what you're trying to do. For what you're trying to do, you may need to be a little closer. So again, it comes back to, you need to know what you need to do. You need to know what your applications are doing, what their requirements are, and that dictates how big of a coverage cell is going to be appropriate for you. It's kind of it's not a non-answer, but that is the answer.
Yeah, and of course, if you're still watching, you can reach out to us. We'll put our email addresses into the chat here, and if you have any questions when you're considering these things, we can help discuss that with you and really figure out what exactly you need for coverage and how we can configure that. Okay, great question. Way to almost stump Matt, but not quite. So,
I've had that question before.
He's had it once or twice. He's, as a reminder to those watching, he's a solution architect here, and he's been with 3DP for a number of years. So it's almost next to impossible to stump him at this point.
Don't say that.
Red rag to a bunch of bulls, I reckon.
Yeah, here comes all the hard questions are coming now.
Everyone from now on asks only Matt questions. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Matt.
Isn't that the quote? Is the wisdom is knowing that you know absolutely nothing? True wisdom.
That's exactly it. My microphone's breaking up here, maybe.
Just blame it on technology, right? It's like, yep, microphone's not working. Ron, who is our president here at 3DP, actually, he said, good answer, Matt. So kudos there. He wanted to add that each band also has different transmit power limits, etc., which will provide big differences in performance. The panel all agrees with you, Ron. That's a good thing to add. So we have a question again, same one who tried to stump you, Matt. When a user requests a dedicated link, can we know what the highest DLUL dedicated capacity the use can have from the LTE base station, or do we have to deploy a separate PTP dedicated link for the user?
if this is a mobile user, if it's a stationary user, that the answer is probably a little bit different. In LTE, and this again is going to depend on band, what band you're in. I think that information is publicly available for which band you're in and what the download and upload maxes are. And what you'll find with the public bands especially is that you're going to get a lot more download than you're going to get upload. And obviously because everything's geared towards the consumer, you know, person on their phone watching YouTube, they don't need to really upload a whole lot. The other part of it is that most LTE modems are only going to have a single transmit antenna, which is going to limit, again, how much you're able to transmit. Those are going to be kind of the limiting factors, things you need to consider. But as far as for hard numbers on LTE, it does depend on which band you're in.
Yeah, very much so. It can sway substantially based on that alone.
Yeah, there can be a big difference between the different bands. And I think that you can actually find that on Wikipedia, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, so he just clarified the question is for a station customer, let's say an office, bank, etc.
Static.
Yeah.
Because we're, you know, we deal mostly with mines and industrial areas. For me, I would probably lean towards a point-to-point solution there. But if it's, you know, a bank or something in the middle of the city, you're going to have other problems with, you know, you're probably going to need to look into license spectrum realistically. But that would be, that's the way that I would go with it. But LTE is probably worth looking into. It really is going to depend on what the LTE coverage is like in your area and what the data needs are.
And also, I mean, anyone that uses LTE enough knows, public LTE knows that, you know, performance varies given the time of day. So if your applications are really critical to maintain a performance level and, you know, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when everyone gets home from school, and then at 6 o'clock at night when everyone gets home from work, your performance drops because the network's being loaded, might not be sufficient. And that's, I suppose, where your own private link, your own PTP will give you that, you know, give you better performance, more
predictable
performance.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
I did do this once in a past life at a past job with a point-to-point link between 2 office buildings, and it was on 5 gig. And then a new neighbor moved into the floor below with 5 gig wireless equipment, and we had to go a different route after that because it was no longer
interference.
It was just too much interference to handle for what they needed to do. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. That unpredictability when you're in an area like that, for sure. So you got kudos, Matt. He said exactly. Good point.
Thank you. I'm glad you agree.
Thanks for that question. I would love to hear from those of you that are watching. If you have any stories or sort of any examples of where LTE really worked for you or where it didn't, any of the challenges that you came across, please feel free to pop it into the chat. It would be really interesting to hear straight from your mouths any of these sort of considerations that we're talking about with projects with LTE.
Has anybody complimented us on our shirts yet?
No one has complimented your shirts.
We all got dressed together, I think.
Yeah. The guys here for our viewers, they all wore their great 3DP shirts, and we popped on the call here before it started, and I was like, wow, you guys are looking really good. I missed the memo. I don't have a 3DP
Well,
shirt.
for a that sounded, wow, you guys are looking really good for a change.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, exactly.
It is.
Not the typical work from home uniform I have on.
Yeah. Fun fact, Nigel actually has a kangaroo friend that visits him like every day. I was
sleeps out here.
expecting you to pop on a 3DP shirt onto him.
I couldn't really show him on the video because he does some rather inappropriate things with his paws sometimes. But yeah, he's probably sitting out in the bushes there somewhere.
He's your own peeping Tom, but he's a peeping Colin.
Peeping Colin, yeah.
So the same person here. The reason I ask is because from my previous work experience, when a user is requesting more than 10, 15 Mbps link, we usually consider them for P2 point-to-point deployment.
We lean pretty heavily on point-to-point and point-to-multipoint technologies within our designs. As much as we're a wireless networking company, the strength of a wireless is how quickly you can get your traffic off the wireless. So in a mine, you could imagine there's not fiber, there's not power, there's not Ethernet available at further reaches from the dispatch office or the buildings or the crusher or anything like that. So we leverage them very heavily. It's a big part of our design is to make sure that distribution layer or the backhaul layer are there to, again, offload that data as quickly as possible off the wireless and keep the airwaves free and ultimately keep performance at its peak, basically. So
to provide a node, like a deterministic link in the middle of the wireless fray of changing things.
Yeah, great questions. Thanks for popping those into the chat there about LTE. We definitely know it's a really popular topic, and I'm sure Chad, if you're still watching, he's from Nokia. He's loving all of the conversations around LTE. Without a doubt here. Yeah, so another question popped up into the chat. Do you offer services that help support the network after it is implemented?
Matt and I have both lived that world. I manage that group. So we do have a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year support department. I think a large majority of our business has been built off of not just our good solutions, it's the ongoing support that comes after. The network's only as good as the people that are able to maintain it, or those people who are able to then ultimately lean on somebody for some support. So our general hope is that we're able to train somebody while we're doing deployments, and ultimately they gain some knowledge working shoulder to shoulder with us when we're doing the installs and the commissioning of the network. But following, we certainly do have our support team that is available and there to answer questions via email or phone. And then we also do have various managed services offerings as well, which are, pretty critical, whether you're monitoring the network from afar or just providing a tool for you to monitor the network. It could be periodic site visits, whether monthly, quarterly, biannually, whatever. These are all things we can discuss and ultimately wish to be a part of with you. It's a journey together, and we want to partner with our customers and forge long-lasting relationships, not just sell you something and then walk away from it and wash our hands. So that's a really, really good question, and ultimately it's really important and near and dear to our hearts, I think. So
back to what we mentioned earlier, those early discussions about capability, capacity, and want are really the driving force in making sure we set up what we provide to make customers focus. And as examples of what we've done there, we've had customers that have every intent of managing the networks themselves, but just simply can't get the resources to do it. And so we've embedded staff, and still to this day have embedded staff with our customers to provide that 6-month, 12-month, we're at 2 years with one customer, embedded resource role to make sure you have the skills to keep it going. So it's good about being flexible.
Yeah, and on the managed services side, I mean, we have the expertise. We know, we can look at things beyond the ping, what's up and down. We can kind of get out ahead of it and say, look, we see something that's going a little bad here. Let's get out in front of it instead of causing downtime. Let's just go take care of this before it becomes a problem. that's something that I did for quite a while here at 3DP, and it can really kind of move your network from being pretty reliable to super reliable.
Yeah, so we had another question, and this ties into exactly what you're talking about, and maybe we can add a little bit more. I think we've touched on a lot of it already, but what is something that a client should be prepared for or should think about with the ongoing care and feed of the network once it goes live?
Part of it's depending on the technology, but I mean, common things that we see are trailer moves, just as an example. You know, there's blasting in the pit. You got to get the trailers out of there, otherwise you're going to blow apart your solar panels and ultimately ruin your solar trailer. So moving a solar trailer to allow, or multiple solar trailers to ultimately allow for the blasting to happen. And, you know, once blasting is finished, obviously you're going to get down there with your shovels and everything else and start moving that dirt that's been blasted, so the ore that's been blasted. So you've got to get those trailers redeployed, realigned, and it's really critical to have those trailers, specifically like a subscriber module on a point to multi-point link, to be really aligned and dialed in. And in certain networks, you got to be managing the power levels of those radios. Again, we don't want to be blasting too much RF out there. If your radio's screaming hot, it's going to be reaching much further than it should be. And that just causes self-interference across the network with other nodes. So we want to try and tighten those coverage zones down and provide localized coverage rather than maximal coverage. That's important for tuning.
And your mind's going to move. You need to be, you know, you can't just set your access points up today and expect they're going to work in 2 years. You're going to need to move them. That's just the reality of it. If you are using point-to-point links and point-to-multi-point links, they might degrade over time. We've seen hills pop up overnight and a link go down. We had a pretty interesting one with a crane swinging in the way of a link. That kind of stuff happens. People parking in front of links on their lunch break. You know, those are all things that kind of happen once the network's up and live that you need to be aware of, and certainly stuff that we're aware of. As far as, and Jared's talking about the power levels, and I'm talking about the mine moving. And so you got to augment your coverage, and you got to kind of understand what your coverage is out there. And one of our cool services that we have is using our network performance analysis toolkit known as NPAT, and doing runs with that and collecting data and being able to visualize it and compare it month over month or from a year ago to today. That's a tool that we use to say, okay, look, we're starting to lose coverage in this area, or you're just getting a little too far away from this access point. Let's see, how do we move things around? You know, it helps us look at the interference on channels, because as much as hills go up, the hills come down as well, and all of a sudden you might have two access points right beside each other on the same channel, which is not a good thing. So we've got tools that we've developed for that, because we understand that is, these are the problems you face, and without having any visibility into them, it just gets worse and worse until one day things just aren't talking. So.
And right at the, I suppose, the outset of moving from that, finishing a new network off and handing it over to the customer, we do a lot. Well, we hope we do a lot. I think we do. We do a lot to actually inform and train and get the customer ready to deal with all this stuff. Like all of these problems can seem a bit overwhelming without the context of here are the tools and here's the process to manage. So during the project, I think Jer mentioned this, our preference is to get the customer their site champion or site champions, the people that we need to focus on to get them up to speed. Working with us, like just having touch points to be able to see how we do particular things like setting up a solar trailer, moving a solar trailer, looking at tuning and optimizing the network. What are we looking for? Doing some classroom training. So particularly for customers that really don't have the capability yet, giving us a couple of days in the classroom to teach them about antenna theory and radio and data and the design principles, which are not intuitive. You know, and why don't you guys put just put one access point up on top of a tower and turn the power up, you know. So what's the alternative approach and how do we manage it? So training those site champions in how to do it, and then being the guys on the end of the phone when you run into trouble, managing it yourself. And, you know, ultimately that handover process is an important part of success. We give you the design, we give you the as-builts. This is the way the network was left. And from our wonderful little red box, we give you that NPAT output, which says this is how well the network's performing. That becomes the baseline for your network forevermore. And we can keep going back and testing it. You know, we don't have to be on site to do it. I mean, one of the things that for me is really important is getting at least some of our IEPs embedded with our customers, so that we can simply pull that client-facing data from IEP Collector and NPAT, the actual visualization tool, and go, yeah, it looks like you've got a coverage issue there and you're going to need to move a solar trailer. So preparing the customer for it is a big piece of what we do during the project as well.
Yeah, we had a comment as you were talking there from Joshua. We have proven it is safer to leave the portable towers in place for a blast versus letting operations move them. And Jeff was like, yeah, Josh, I felt that pain before.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't align up the right type of link properly, you can bring down your network. So you know, for those who are not familiar, it's critical. It's absolutely critical. And I have spent many nights up helping customers try and troubleshoot a network problem where something exactly like that has happened, for sure. So
solid point, Joshua. That is for sure. Joshua, where are you tuning in from? I'd love to hear a specific example with that. That would be good to know. Zach has a question here. Outside LTE wireless connectivity, do you have other PTMP wireless deployment? And if yes, what equipment? Is it Cambium, Mimosa, Radwin, etc.?
So I can start touching on that. 3DP considers herself to be vendor agnostic. I think without question, the primary technology we've used for point-to-point or point-to-multipoint has been Cambium, though we're also a Redline partner as well. And we've certainly worked with others, whether it's Ubiquiti, Radwin, Aviat, and other technologies. So there's lots of options out there. You know, you become more familiar with one over the other sometimes, and we have an increased comfort level. But you know, part of that needs analysis, understanding what is required, and ultimately picking a technology to suit.
And a good example of that was a recent one here in Australia, where a customer was really quite happy with the technology that they had on site for their point-to-point links, and wanted an upgrade to the latest version of that radio. We weren't familiar with it. It wasn't in our toolkit. And so we wanted to do some due diligence on it as well. When we brought the links in, we tested them, we learned how to, you know, I suppose a best practice configuration, and we trained our support guys on how to support it, so that we were able to say, yeah, you're not getting yourself into trouble by using this stuff for our purposes, and we're adopting it and able to support it ongoing. So I think again, it's all about flexibility and what the customer wants. Sometimes they don't want the right stuff. That's a harder discussion.
Yeah, Joshua added, it's easy to figure out what is wrong when the trailer is upside down.
We've seen that too.
Yeah, we've had that problem before.
Probably imagine seeing that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Joshua is actually a 3DP customer out of Alberta, Canada. That's awesome. Thanks, Joshua, for tuning in. Hopefully you're still a happy customer if you're tuning in here. So thanks for participating today. So Jeff Smeal, sorry if I didn't pronounce your last name right there, Jeff. He says, Josh, I won't go on leave again. So there has to be a story there, guys. Come on, share it with us.
Flesh it out, yeah.
Nice to see you, Josh and Jeff. Nice to see you guys here.
Yeah, hey guys.
Talk lots on email, so good to see you guys on.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you guys that are tuning in. I'm sure you have some good stories you could share with the rest of us here. That's hilarious. So we're almost wrapping up here with our event. So please feel free to pop in any sort of questions that you might have for our panel here. I also shared with all of you who are watching Matt's email, mattrankin@3dp.com, since you seem to have a lot of questions.
A lot of love for Matt. A lot of love for
A lot
Matt.
of questions
yeah.
off to him about LTE that
Send 'em
you
over.
handled great. So feel free to reach out to him. I also put my email in the chat, NicoleMiller@3dp.com. I'm not so great at answering questions, but I'm really great at getting answers for your questions from the appropriate people. So go ahead and send off an email to either one of us, and we can help you out with any questions that you may have as well. So we will end the event maybe with one more question, and we don't have to end right on time, guys. So if you do have some pressing questions, please feel free to put them into the chat and we can answer them for you. So how are you able to help a mine with minimizing downtime?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll make one good point about it. I won't take them all, but so that you guys, we could share this answer for sure. One is that our equipment that we sell is tested. It's rugged for mining. We're not going to sell you some consumer thing. I'm not going to name any brand names, but if we're selling it, it's built for the mining environment. It's built to take the punishment. It's built for cold weather if you're in the north. It's built for the hot weather if you're in the south in Australia.
Yeah, and not just our own equipment either, right? It's the
100%.
vendors we choose to work with. So let's
Yeah,
clarify that.
We have great vendors who are watching on the call. Daryl with Ragen is fantastic to deal with. Fun fact about our intelligent endpoints, like the one that you can see behind Jeremy and the one that you can see behind Matt, on our YouTube channel, so the channel that you tuned into for this event, we actually have a bunch of videos where we test how rugged one of our intelligent endpoints is, the Hornet. So you can see it being submerged into a lake, literally dropped out of an airplane, shot from a cannon, things like that. So we say it's rugged, and we really put it to the test.
So to back up what the guys were saying, the selection of the equipment is hugely important, and making stuff that's going to last out there in the industrial environment where it is. The other piece I think we've alluded to a couple of times is it's not just about the equipment. You can get a fantastically rugged piece of equipment and destroy it really quickly if you do the wrong things with it. So working with us, you get this experience of having put 100 plus networks together globally, and the hard-learned examples of what you do and what you don't do. That comes out in our best practices. That comes in our quality focus. Put a really ruggedized antenna on the wrong part of a vehicle and it'll disappear in a few days. So that's what sits behind the rugged technology. Our understanding of what heavy machinery is, what it does, and how people use it. So really important part of it.
Installation quality is absolutely critical. It's things like drip loops on your cables. It's securing them so they're not abrading and rubbing in the vibration, protecting those antennas while still trying to maximize the open air access that they have. Securing them in the right plane so they're not vibrating too badly, things like that. So it's all things that need to be taken into consideration, and ultimately you're going to maximize your return on that investment, because this equipment's not cheap, but the downtime again is where the true cost comes into play. So,
and another rather really interesting thing I think the three of us have all experienced is downtime due to what I call administrative causes. And that is I'll give you a really good example of a customer whose network would operate brilliantly up until about 7 o'clock in the evening. And then it had collapsed, just absolutely useless in terms of the mining applications. And when they brought us in to kind of fault find and see if we could help, what we found was an administrative problem, and that is the workers at about 7 o'clock of an evening would connect to the Wi-Fi access points and start watching videos. And so the simple admin action was password protect it and protect your password. Those sort of things as well. I know one of Jer and Matt's most unfond memories are of people configuring devices on the network that probably shouldn't have done it. So where that takes us to is back to that original thing I talked about, and that is education and listening and sharing and bringing the right stakeholders in from the mine to go, what we're doing is this, and this is how it impacts you, and these are some of the things you shouldn't do unless you've got administrative controls or at least assistance from us so that we know that you're going to make changes. Because one of the things our support guys love is when a network is working beautifully and then 2 seconds later it stops and we don't know why, and our customer doesn't seem to know why, and someone's had a bit of a play. And yeah, so yeah, there's lots of ways to keep downtime as low as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's when you all start to play Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and figure out kind of what went wrong and the key of the downtime.
Yeah.
So that wraps up our event for everyone who is tuning in. I will ask the panel, do you have anything to add before we sign off? Any sort of fun facts or tidbits or words of wisdom that you can give our viewers before we end the event here?
Thanks for joining. It's been fun. Hour and 20 minutes flew by. Actually, I was kind of worried that I'd be struggling to figure out what to say in this. So.
Yeah, that did go by super fast. That's fun.
Yeah, it was fun, everyone. Thank you for so many of the great questions that we had. We so appreciate you tuning in. This video will be available after the live event is ended, so you can come back to our YouTube channel and check out the video or share it with any of your friends, family members, or coworkers. You can give it a go and watch again. We'll also share it on our LinkedIn page and our website, so you can watch it on either one of those platforms tomorrow, and you can check it out that way. And we just wanted to say a huge thank you again for everyone that tuned in. For something to look forward to is actually on Tuesday, we kick off our Technical Tuesday videos, and Nigel, who is our panel expert here, is starting the series with a really entertaining video, and it's going to be how is yoga and our 3DP intelligent endpoint connected. So you all are about to find out on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. Sorry, Matt?
I said, I can't wait. I don't even know how to pronounce it.
She made me do it. She made me do it. That's all I can say.
Nigel, can you end the event with a yoga move for everyone? Can you?
No chance, because it's a safety hazard. I'll just fall on my bum.
Oh, that's so nice, Josh. Oh, Joshua just put a comment here. Oh, this is so heartwarming. Anyone who is not a 3DP customer and is considering a deployment, they are great at what they do. Help me deploy a network for a greenfield project. We had to design around a mine plan with no mine.
Thanks, Josh. Really appreciate it, mate.
Oh,
been good working with
nice.
you guys.
Sounds like you're a fantastic client yourself, Joshua. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for those kind words for our hardworking employees here. And thank you to our panel of experts for tuning in today. You guys did a fantastic job. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone who is watching learned a lot as well.
Thanks,
All right.
all.
Hey, everyone.
Bye, Mom.
Look forward to talking to you soon. See you, Matt's mum.
Bye, Matt's mom.
Bye, Matt's mom. You never said hi, so.